So I'm watching the Kingdom anime from start to finish for the first time, and I've made it to the end of the Keiyou Campaign Arc. An early insight into my thoughts on the arc, it was actually a super solid war arc. The characters and concepts introduced were simply amazing. The Keiyou Campaign was the arc that people said before I started the anime that I was going to absolutely love if I could just make it through the first. They were right, but my more extensive thoughts on the arc I'm going to save for later because we can't ignore the first 15 episodes of the anime. I've had many people tell me that the first 15 episodes of the Kingdom anime, the first arc, Seikyo's Rebellion, it's not going to be good. It's not enjoyable. The kids would say to thug it out until the first war arc. But it was a bit confusing to me when I was watching the first couple of episodes because I actually really enjoyed the arc. Obviously, it wasn't insanely good or peak, but it was good. To me, the first arc did a great job in setting up the lore of the Kingdom anime. In the first episode alone, we meet Shin and Hyo, the main characters. Both are aiming to be the greatest generals in history, hailing from the state of Qin. Hyo then dies. What? That means maybe Shin is the true main character. This first episode alone felt like the story already had so much to offer and tease. Like, let me sit forward and lock in real quick. Later on in this first arc, we then meet Sei, a guy that looks exactly like Hyo, but turns out he's actually the king of Qin. Maybe this guy is the main character. So, a young boy who dreams of being a great general and a young king who possesses no military might to fight back against his evil brother Seikyo, who stole the throne. Truly a match made in heaven. This is what people mean when they say, and so the plot thickens. We even get to meet our first great general of the series, Oki. He is the pinnacle of what Shin is trying to achieve. There was a lot to offer in the first arc, but people say they don't like it because maybe it felt too slow or not as epic as one would expect for a romanticized story on the warring states, since I think a lot of people do know about the three kingdoms. I guess they're not completely wrong, but it comes together perfectly by the Keiyou Campaign Arc's conclusion, which we'll get to. But I also like the first arc because you get to see all the stable characters having fun and messing around with each other, and some side characters are introduced into the story. This is Ten, Shobun-kun, Heki. It shows them and Shin all interacting with each other, and kind of gives that classic comedic anime feel that you see a lot more in older anime. And I like it because it makes them more human and gives them a chance to be more relatable and understood before the series inevitably becomes darker. Something that I do have to say about the arc is that the rate of which Shin's strength grew was low-key fast. This pacing though is something that I really enjoy about the Kingdom anime. Shin went from some outback farm servant that only fought with wooden swords against his brother to taking down multiple assassins and skilled warriors. He literally goes toe-to-toe with Saji, and he is considered, apparently by himself though, to be the strongest swordsman in the world. At this point I'm like, alright bro, Shin is built different. He only the day before encountered his first couple assassins, and only a few minutes prior had his first real kill. But the first arc I think did a solid job in setting up the precedent for why Shin is this way. It's not like everything he does is an asshole. The entire point of his childhood was that Shin and Hyo prepared essentially nearly the entirety of their life for this opportunity to overcome any fight that would allow them to get closer to their dream on the battlefield. I mean, there's a reason why the story began with Shin having had 1,000 duels with Hyo, in which Hyo said they were trying their absolute hardest. If it weren't for using wooden swords, it would probably be simulating a life and death duel. In the first episode, they're shown to be dueling nearly immediately. Shin is not going toe-to-toe with Saji, and he's not folding these assassins if not for these 1,000 duels with Hyo, which would be, I'd imagine, years of experience built up using the sword. Honestly, Hyo might have been overall more skilled than Shin at the beginning, because his sword skills are on par with Shin. He had zero difficulty leading and organizing troops against the Yoki army soldiers. Like, he sort of is more capable than Shin. But Shin, like Hyo said, has always had that vital flight response. That's the best way I can put it. It's a real thing. For humans, when it really matters and we are pushed beyond what we think is possible, that's when the body is able to perform greater than usual. But Shin's ability to do this is truly second to none. It does make you question it a bit, but I'm sure it's something that can be explained later on. But yeah, first arc, very solid. Solid is the best way to describe it. And then onto the final episodes. Bajio, the Mountain King's lieutenant, is shown to be a beast when it comes to martial might. Sei beats the crap out of Seikyo after giving a badass speech about why he'll never be king. That's badass speech number 3, by the way. First was declaring his dream of unifying all of China to Jotunwa, the Mountain King, saying he would destroy all borders, including unifying with the mountains. Not only does she harbor the same dream of unification, Jotunwa is also awesome because she puts herself on the line immediately to fight alongside Sei, folding everyone in her way. Second, at the Royal Gate, Sei was urging his troops to keep holding on, to not give up, to fight on and keep the hope alive, to have faith that shit, this servant boy would perform. Sei's loyalty here is great. Oki at the end of the arc also pulls up an absolutely no diffs Giko, an elite soldier on horseback, such a fraud. And then then Oki goes on to almost threaten Sei about his capability in leading the state of Qin, to which Sei stands firm in his dream and essentially convinces Oki that he is truly dedicated to his path, but still he doesn't have the strength to back up his words. Yet. We think Shin is strong. Oki, we can't even comprehend what happened. Like what? His level is so far above Shin's right now. There's no way he's catching up anytime soon. I can't lie. He seemed like a real deal villain. To even think about killing his own king. This guy's so lame for threatening my dog. But at the same time, he is hella cool. But yeah, that's the core of what happened in the first arc. They obviously do eventually meet Minister Ryofui, who was an absolute bastard. He had the audacity to mock Sei in front of the entire royal court, saying that he was waiting for Sei to die in the rebellion to return, and Shin, of all people, had to calm him down. I will say though, the side characters introduced here are legit. Ryofui's 4 pillars of Ryo, Shoheiku, Mobu, Rishi, Saitaku. 4 powerful men, all juggernauts specializing in their respective areas. Military, law, diplomacy. Shin has no plan. He couldn't scream out or do anything when he saw them. At this point I'm like, I know Shin and Sei are the main characters and they'll win in the end one way or another, but how are we letting them walk into our territory and smack their nuts in our face? But with the conclusion of this rebellion and the main villain introduced, it was time to go to the Keiyou Campaign Arc. Shin is going to his very first war campaign, the first step in his dream. All in all, I thought this first arc did a great job in setting up the Keiyou Campaign Arc. Now that Shin has gotten his foot in the door with some of his own money and land, it's time to pull up to the battlefield, take some heads, and leave with the juiciest achievement. So Shin arrives on the Dark Hand Plains, and for the first time, it gets to really soak it in. All of this bloodshed and fighting is where his dream is given the chance to come to fruition. This is where we get Shin's first feat of strength after fully recovering from the rebellion. Because remember, Shin has not gotten to rest since he fought Joker, the assassin from that fateful night. So there's plenty of armies, and Shin happened to get assigned to the 4th, who were given the toughest task, to charge a wall of shielded spear wielders with only infantry. Nobody in the history of the Warring States has been able to overcome this as a single foot soldier, probably. But Shin obviously is someone who can accomplish such a feat. He runs towards them on his own, leaps over the wall, and creates an opening from the inside. And everyone's thinking, what is going on? In the entire history of Wave, we've never been breached by a child. Point is, Shin is clearly stronger than what he was in his first arc, and the pacing can feel pretty fast, but I think it makes sense how Shin can improve at such a rapid rate. The higher the stakes, the greater Shin is able to perform. It is the precedent that was set in the previous arc, and Sei said it himself. Shin has always had, for the most part, the ability, but honing that killing intent is a whole different beast. It's different when you're fighting an opponent to the death rather than your brother. Then we get a real threat that shows up. Kyugen is a general, places his full strategic abilities on display, using the famed Wei War chariots to body the entire 4th army and nearly Shin as well. He pretty much said, yeah, alright buddy, Shin has trained and experienced a lot for such a short amount of time, and this allowed him to improve by miles, but he's not general level. Yet. This is what I really like about the Keiyou Campaign Arc. They build Shin up to eventually be enough of a threat to make an impact without doing something outlandish like Shin slaying a great general in his first campaign, within quite a short amount of episodes. With the lessons he learns from people like Bakukoshin or General Oki throughout the arc, it makes sense. There's not really a point in the Keiyou Campaign Arc where I feel something that Shin does is an insane asspull. Again, the pacing can be fast in terms of how he grows, but it's on point for Shin's character. Anyways, Shin, by what can only be called the luck of the gods, or in other words, his newest female comrade Kyokai's genius tactics, survives the onslaught caused by Wei's war chariots, which beset literally the whole rest of the 4th army. After all that, Shin has to climb the hill where General Kyugen is located and try to survive yet another onslaught, which is like them saying just because one measly group of infantry miraculously lived doesn't mean the grand scheme of the battle was actually affected. Shin ends up deflecting this rain of arrows while fighting up the hill and slays Wei's master archer Korrigan. And then Bakukoshin and Shin at the top of the hill encounter General Kyugen face to face. Now, Kyugen starts off impressive, honestly, and finishes very unlikable. But it's a little unfair because he ended up killing my boy Bakukoshin, who I didn't like at first, but actually ended up loving because he was so real. The one thing that he said, Shin will never forget, that the sacrifice of all their comrades never amounts to nothing. And it feels so right, because he then drives his sword into into the neck of General Kyou and goes out swinging. He even lets Shin claim the head as his crowning achievement as he slowly bleeds out. Bakukoshin really became a beloved hero in the end. Though what they achieved here was important, they all realized this was only one of 4 locations. The other armies were still at full strength, and no way were they going to be able to advance or even safely descend the hill. What a surprise! So they have to think of something. That's when Commander Heki sees something peculiar on the cliffside in the distance. Oki and his hilarious looking Lieutenant To spectating the current battle. Turns out it is a crime to join a battle without being appointed by the king prior, but General Oki comes up with a perfect excuse. He simply enjoys the view from atop the hill Shin is currently at, and he will cut down anyone that stops him from approaching it. To with his stupid face and voice agrees, and it is so funny whenever this duo is on screen. But once Oki arrives, this is the first time that Shin meets such a figure and he can't breathe. He is setting his eyes physically on what he wants to achieve and even surpass for the first time. This brings me back to the point that Shin isn't entirely skilled yet. He still has many weak points when it comes to understanding what it takes to be a general, even though he has learnt a lot from Sei, Shobunkun, and Heki. But Oki ends up helping Shin with figuring it out, saying something quite interesting, that war at the end of the day belongs to its generals. From the way soldiers are deployed, to the sacrifices from start to finish, every life, every tactic is conjured up by the great generals of each army, all for the sake of winning the war. Which is why Oki says that war at the end of the day belongs to its generals. Amazing. We'll get back to this, because the way that it all comes together by the end of the Keiyou Campaign Arc is beyond beautiful. Anyway, Oki accidentally helps them out. They're about to charge into the enemy, with Heki suggesting Oki take the lead, but meanwhile, the enemy commander-in-chief, Great General Gokei, was already deploying a defensive measure at the bottom of the hill. And while this was happening, Shin's commander-in-chief, Great General Keiyou, finally made a direct move. Remember what was said before, no sacrifice ever amounts to nothing. So Keiyou, seeing success on the 4th Army's battlefield, not only committed his entire force, but he himself chose to capitalize on this opportunity and personally join the fight. I didn't know what Keiyou was planning or had in mind, but it was explained in the end by Oki. There was just something so weird about this guy. I'm like, he's definitely cooking something, but he doesn't seem like he even thinks before acting. You'd think a general would be a little bit more meticulous and a little less crazy. And then onto the most tense moment. Great General Keiyou, Great General Gokei. They match up in a duel to decide the outcome of the entire war. Before I continue with that, I have to say, Keiyou is too cool. His style was aggressive, and he wastes no time placing pressure on the enemy headquarters. But he is one insane MF, and despite Oki's soldiers being described as demon gods, when led by Oki himself, Oki said Keiyou when leading his soldiers is even stronger. So what does that say? Even when Heki got in his feelings when Oki said war belonged to its generals, Keiyou used Heki's sudden flank attack as an opportunity to utilize a pincer attack, since Gokei was low-key beating his ass before Heki joined in. Keiyou is a weird guy, very unconventional, but now it all starts to make sense when Oki took us and Shin to school once again and introduced one of the most epic and intriguing concepts in the entire Kingdom anime, the eternal theme of instinctive generals versus clever generals. In other words, war will always consist of generals like Keiyou, who rely on instinctive actions and intuition, and those like Gokei, who rely on logic. When Oki said this, I thought, okay, we really keep cooking, huh? Shin must have been so inspired, since he then went on to destroy a general that thoroughly underestimated him, Shuki, known as an apparent general slam. Anyways, back to the duel. Gokei puts up a fight, but then bang, Keiyou had enough with the sob stories. He wanted to know Gokei's reason for fighting, but once that was done, he didn't even break a sweat and cleaved him in half. There's just so much to love about this Keiyou campaign arc, and so the war ends in a Shin victory. The remaining Wei soldiers are too scared to continue, since Oki with his virtually untouched army is still observing them from an advantageous vantage point. To end the arc, one last strategic masterclass, and no surprise, it's Oki. If it wasn't clear already, Keiyou confirmed that without joining the fight, Oki's presence alone placed immense pressure on the Wei army, making them think, why on earth hasn't Shin's greatest general made a move? But that's all my thoughts for now. If there was anything that you enjoyed, or maybe that I might have missed that I didn't mention, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Did you enjoy this video? Check out my other videos. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to stay updated on my latest videos. I appreciate you guys.